Our final speaker for the evening is Etta Bozkurt, presenting her talk titled The Ethics of Seeing, Making Knowledge Public. She is a Ph.D. student in architecture from Ankara, Turkey. An interesting fact about Ida is she is a competitive ballroom dancer. You got it. I'll let you got it. Please join me in welcoming Ida.
All right. I just want to start with a very quick question. What do you do when you lose something? Do you retrace your steps? Look under every surface, the bed, the couch? I also sometimes need to look under my dog's toy basket. Maybe you order more air tags and just hope for the best. When we lose things like that, we just assume that they're easy to recover. Or if not, we just simply replace them, right? But some losses don't work that way. I got to rethink the meaning of loss this past summer. Let me take you to Ankara, Turkey, my hometown. This is where I grew up in. I know its streets, its hills, its rhythms, or I guess I only thought I did. Until I stepped outside my little pink bubble and into the neighborhoods that are actually being demolished through urban renewal over years. I was just not doing research there. I was also confronting how partial my understanding of a familiar place had been. So one day, a woman invited me into her new apartment. She pulled out a photograph, handed it to me. It was a picture from her old house, which has already been demolished a couple of years ago. She looked me in the eye, held my hand, and said something that I will never forget. She said, "Write this down so people don't forget us." I nodded my head, but then later I felt very uneasy. Like, what does it really mean to write something down? Like, where do I write? Who am I to write? Who do I write for? And maybe most importantly, what happens to those stories that I read and move on, but people don't? Because that woman still visits her old neighborhood pretty frequently. Not because the buildings are there, obviously, because they're all torn down, but because her people are. One day she invited me, she asked me to tag along and took me to what I want to call bread making party. So it is here. This is the bread making party, which happens every Sunday at a small bake room. So if you were there with me that day, you would see the smoke and flour floating in the air. You would feel the heat coming from the hearth. You will smell the freshly baked bread. And if you were lucky, they could offer you a slice and you could have tasted it. It was very good. So women sat on the floor around the stove oven, which they made with their hands. They were talking constantly. They were talking about their husbands, their children, their everyday chores, everyday struggles. They were doing little gossip. And I was just standing there, like holding my little notebook, trying to take notes, record the moment. It was like, what am I doing there? Like, where do I even sit? I was unsure. But what they were not talking about that day, though, was how to make the bread. They didn't need to. Everyone knew. There was no hierarchy, no instructions. Everyone knew when to step in, when to step back. And I was just struggling. Anyway, so I just decided to let myself be present with them instead. And I did. And at that moment, I realized that That way of being together had absolutely no place in the plans, the urban renewal plans that made for that neighborhood, and many others. I recognize that. Those people don't forget themselves. They carry knowledge in their bodies, in their gestures, in their routines, the way they gather, they cook, they laugh, and they care for one another. Yeah. So the question was not whether they will be forgotten. The question was who is willing to see them? And that question really shaped how I approach research. I no longer see justice as something you deliver at the end, but something that you actively practice along the way. Think about it. Seeing is never neutral. A camera, a map, a notebook, like remember the one that I was holding in the bake room, which was super irrelevant. They can all create distance. But when they're used with people, not only for them, they can be tools of visibility, care, shared authorship, shared ownership. This is why I use participatory methods in my research. I invite people to take their own pictures, tell their own stories, and decide how they want their stories to be told. And in fact, this very picture was taken by the woman who invited me there. Full disclosure, she gave me her consent to use it here so she knows that I'm actually telling her story. So before I finish, I want to do a little exercise with you. If you feel comfortable, I ask you to close your eyes and think of a place that really matters to you. It could be the house you grew up in. It could be the street where you learned how to ride a bike. Or maybe, I don't know, a schoolyard where you used to play hide and seek with your friends. Just somewhere that is really special to you. Now ask yourself, if that place disappeared tomorrow, who would remember how life once had been there? Let yourself sit with that feeling. Let it sink in. Now you can open your eyes. So that feeling, that quiet sense of loss, attachment, belonging, is what anchors my research. It is where I ask, what if justice begins with how we choose to see and who we refuse to look away from? Because when knowledge is shared with intention, it doesn't only document loss. Sometimes it becomes an act of care, and sometimes it becomes a form of justice. Thank you.